Oh, it's not a green light anymore.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Nothing, not a thing.
Gives me an excuse to come to you.
Yeah, you can, because it's coming directly. Go back there and get me a hand mic. Can you hear it now? Good, that's what it's supposed to be. I want everybody to hear it.
Nothing on this one
It's
either.
not all that great, but
Nope. Yeah, it's not coming across the.
how's this? Okay. All right, Jason, we're okay here. It's working apparently. At any rate, I've heard some people complain that they only got one sentence in a verse in 1 Corinthians to teach on. I got one word, trust. And after they assigned me that, James stepped all over trust. And after he got through with it, Mark did the same thing. So, since they did that and I had to totally redo my talk, they have agreed tonight we're going to wait till the end before we take any remarks, and they're going to answer all of your questions on any Bible subject. We have been talking about love, agape kind of love. And I do love you guys. I pray for every one of you every night. Those of you who have special needs, like David Mulliken and others, I pray for your healing every night of the week, sometimes every day, sometimes multiple times, because I do love you. Now, to contrast that kind of love that is talked about in 1 Corinthians, why is there so much hate in the world today? It's getting worse, it seems, every day. I'm worried that perhaps we may have a civil war on our hands between the people who support the Palestinians and the people who support Israel. So why is there so much conflict there? Well, you got to go all the way back to Abraham. He helped God out because he thought he didn't get his son as soon as he needed it. And the result of that was Ishmael. Now, Ishmael, as you probably know, is an Arab. And although he probably speaks some of the same language, if not both languages, the Bible very plainly says he's going to be a thorn in the side forever. So Ishmael kind of established the Arab peoples. And as he did, you go forward a little bit in time, Jesus said, love everybody, love your neighbors. But that's not exactly the way it turned out for a lot of the people in this world. When you get to, I guess it's about 560 AD, Muhammad is born. I'm sure that you probably know that Muhammad is the great prophet of Islam. Now, what's particularly interesting about Muhammad and about the, quote, Holy Quran, he didn't write it. He didn't write a word of it because he was totally illiterate. He could neither write nor read. He couldn't recite anything. So that compilation of the Quran was written by mullahs, preachers, if in our terminology here, after he gave certain lessons. So we have to assume that an uninspired man that spoke had his lessons written down by uninspired people who recalled it from memory. So you get the Quran. Now, in the 3rd century, there were so many different versions of the Quran that one of the mullahs said, these are not all same. We got to have one version. So they demanded that every one that had a copy of it to turn it in to the head mullah, the supreme leader. And they did. And then the supreme leader, in his wisdom, rewrote all of those speeches, none of whom he had heard. But when he did it, he didn't put it in chronological order. He put, well, right here, this happened, and then he doesn't tell you why that happened until several books, chapters, verses, whatever later. You then find out why that particular event happened. And that's what made the Quran, spelled Koran, so difficult. Hello. Oh, that is much better. I can even hear it, and I'm almost totally deaf. Now, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and if you'll notice, people who go to the Catholic Church never refer to themselves as Christians. They're Catholic. But if you read through all of their various doctrines, it bears no resemblance to Christianity. As a matter of fact, I can show you in history where every ritual that they have, that they perform during a Mass, is derived directly from a pagan religion. Every last one of them. There was not even a pope until about 600. The Catholic Church had split. There was one Catholic head guy that was in Rome, and there was one in Europe somewhere. Pardon me? Yeah, Constantinople. I'm getting old. Constantinople. And they had a big brouhaha over who was going to be the head of the Catholic Church. Well, as it turns out, the king supported the guy at Constantinople, and thus he was the first pope. And that was in, I believe it was 600, 616, something like that. Now, they'll tell you that the Pope is a direct descendant of Peter, who happened to have been married. Had to have been, because he had a mother-in-law. But today, they refuse to let their priest be married. They have to remain celibate all their life. So, in the meantime, Muhammad was born in about 560. Now, this guy, even himself admitted that at times he felt like he was mad. Mad in the sense of insane. All of his speeches came from while he was having seizures in a cave. And that was what he talked about. And he very plainly said, I sometimes doubt my own sanity and whether or not I am mad. If he'd asked me, I'd told him you are. But he founded his own religion. That's Islam. Now, what's interesting about Islam is he named his God Allah. But historically, the God that he picked, because he was a polytheist until that point, and the God that he picked was the major God of all of the gods of the people at that time, and it was the moon god. And it was the moon god because a meteorite fell to earth, and that was a sign to him that was God telling him, hey, I'm it, follow me. As a matter of fact, you know, the black thing that they go around, when they rebuilt that, it's been rebuilt 5 or 6 times in history, he put that meteorite in the east corner of that structure. Thus, when they pray, they have to face east. But that's where that comes from, and it was the moon god. So he's got the moon god going, and then he preaches stuff that is obviously not correct. Until the point of Muhammad, all of the pagans in that area got along. They had no problems. No one was killing anyone else because of a difference in theology. But he changed all that. After he preached for about 10 years, I think it was, he had something less than 10 followers, and those were all family, including his wife. And another interesting fact about Muhammad is he was a pedophile. He married I think he actually got her when she was 7 years old, and that was going to become his wife. He waited, though, in his defense, till she was 14. And then he started having the people that he did not agree with beheaded. He earned his money and became really quite wealthy by being a wagon manager, so to speak. It was actually a camel train. He was delivering goods from point A to point B. And that's how he made his money. And this wealthy widow fell in love with him. And he married her as well. Of course, he had about, the best I can determine from history, 7 wives. Most of them are all at the same time. So after he became wildly eccentric at Mecca, where he lived, that's where this all started, the people of Mecca, they ran him out of town. And he went to another part of the Arabias. And that's when he started teaching, if you're not Muslim, you are an infidel, and you deserve to be killed if you refuse to convert. So that started a bloody war that went on with them killing Christians for a number of years. And in 1065, Pope Pius VI launched the first crusade. There were about 3 major crusades, and there were 1 or 2 other small ones. And that went on for a few hundred years. And then, you know, people finally got rid of most of the people who were Muslim, who were murdering other people, and things quietened down for a good long while. You fast forward to here in the United States, we had a number of religions, major religious divisions. Catholics, Methodists, Baptists. There were no Church of Christ at that time. Many people do not realize it, but the Church of Christ basically came from the Anabaptist, which is a whole other set of people. But they had feelings and religious practices much like we have today. And from that, in the 1600s and the Restoration, or the Reformation at first, movement started. And that was a move to reform the Catholic Church, because people were beginning to realize this is not necessarily accurate, and we need to get all this non-essential religious stuff out. It didn't work out. They wanted the Bible in English. They wanted the priest to teach in English. And John Wycliffe said, well, look, we all need our own English Bible where we can read it. So he translated the, what was it called? Septuagint, I believe, the Latin Septuagint. He translated that into English. And for that, he was rewarded with a burning at the stake for blasphemy. The Catholic Church has probably killed more people in history than any group other than possibly Hitler. I don't know how many they killed, but it was a bunch. So you got all of these religious groups going, and then in 1846, John Smith comes across America with his band of followers in wagons going west, and he established the Mormon Church. Well, there's no way to adequately examine what the Book of Mormon says that he wrote. And again, he did not write it. He dictated it in a house, a tent or something, with a quilt on a wire between him and the person that's transcribing it. I don't know what the reason for that was. Probably he didn't want the guy to see him laughing, is what I'm guessing. But he had a so-called a disc of golden tablets, and that's what he used to translate what he said was given him by the angel Moroni. And even today, if you go to Salt Lake City, on top of their main temple, they have a statue of Moroni at the very top of it, blowing a horn. And then we come on forward, and the Campbell Stone movement comes about. After that, that was the Restoration movement, after the Reformation movement. And they got things a lot closer, I guess, to what it should be. Matter of fact, we practice pretty much what they did back in those days. So, we have all this history, beginning with Abraham trying to help God to fulfill his promise. And that's why we have so much hate in this world today. So many other people were trying to fill that vacuum for God. So, I want God to listen to me on a daily basis. Now, in Islam, there is no forgiveness of sins until you die. You cannot be certain that you're going to heaven. It's a balance scale. Good in one side, bad in the other. If the good happens to outweigh the bad that you did in your life, you're in. If it's pretty equal, it's up to Allah to decide. And if the bad outweighs the good, you're going to hell. No ifs, ands, or buts. No matter what kind of life you lived, you just didn't do enough good things. That's why they have their 5 pillars of faith, which one of them is alms. They have to give money. Their things, their picture of heaven, which they call paradise, is a little skewed to me. If you die and you go to paradise, you get 72 virgins. Now, why 72? And how can they have that many virgins after you get there? And if you're a woman, I don't know, maybe whatever. So you got that thing going on, and then we get to today. There are a lot of people today that are unschooled in the truth of the Bible, some of whom sit in churches of Christ probably every week. I've actually heard members of the church that I personally know say, well, when the rapture comes, I hope I'm ready. Well, all right. The rapture is not scriptural. It's not there. It is a premillennialist teaching that was first put in a footnote in a study Bible. I think it was 1835. At that time, it was considered a farce. You can't prove the rapture, even if you believe in it by the Bible. Very plainly says he's only coming back one time, and the rapture would make him have to come back 2 times. And they say that he's going to come back, get his people, and he's going to sit on the throne of David, which no longer exists, in the synagogue, not the synagogue, the temple, which no longer exists. And he's going to have a reign of 1,000 years in which to garner more believers. You only get one shot at this deal, one life. You either believe it and you do it, excuse me, or you do not believe it and you don't do it. You know, Dr. Jeremiah, David Jeremiah, has a new book out. If it weren't for supporting that dude, I'd buy that book. I'd love to know what it says. Some of you guys want to gift me a copy, I'll be happy to read it. But I'm not going to give him my 20 or 30 or whatever dollars, because it's 35 simple to read chapters on how to prepare for the rapture. Okay, why don't you just read the Bible and find out how to get prepared to meet God? There's not going to be a rapture, but be prepared to meet God at some point. Now, I don't know. I can't see anymore either. I'm trying to see how much time I got left. Oh, I got about 12 or 15 minutes. Not nearly enough, but that's okay. So when people in the church today do not understand the biblical principle of the second coming of Christ, what are we to expect of the world? They obviously cannot. Most of them, I don't know, most of them have not read the Bible. I have studied with atheists. They never read the Bible. And they claim there is no God, and how can you claim something does not exist and support that unless there's something to it? People say, I'm mad at God. I don't believe in him anymore. You cannot state that God does not exist on one hand, and yet on the other hand, you're mad at him. Doesn't work. So what kind of God do I want? Do I want to serve? Well, I'm serving him to the best of my ability. It may be woefully poor, but I'm doing the best I can. The Bible teaches me that God is love. Diametrically opposed to all the stuff we've talked about thus far. That's all hate, it's all conjecture, it's all made up, and it's all wrong. So if God is love, and he is, and he rewards those who diligently seek him, and he does, that's good enough for me. On the day of judgment, which there's a lot of misconception, I think, about judgment. When you die, you're judged. 1 minute after you die, or less, you know what your eternal punishment or pleasure is. You either go to paradise with Jesus, or you go to Hades. And people says that's hell. There's 2 words used in the language for hell. One of them is Gehenna, and one of them is, let me think of it. What? Tartarus, yes. One of them is a temporary place, and the other is a permanent place of punishment. Gehenna comes from the valley of Gehenna in Jerusalem area where garbage was burned, and it was a constant consuming fire. Never went out. People carried it, whatever they wanted to dispose of, to the valley of Gehenna, threw it off, and that was it. Smelled terrible, was hot as, really hot. And so they, you got that. I want a God that can save me from that. And God does that if you listen to what his Bible says, and you study it, you learn it, and most importantly, you live it. I'm afraid today we have too many people that kind of know, they're passingly familiar with the Bible, and they kind of know what they need to do. But a lot of us, I include myself in that, are rebellious, and we don't want to submit to God. He sent his son down here. He sent his son in human form because from the foundations of the world, God knew man was going to mess it up. I've also heard people say, if God is so great, why is there so much evil in the world today? Well, that's a simple one. This is not the world that God formed, and it's not the world that he wanted for human beings. It was perfect until Adam and Eve did their little thing and got kicked out of the garden. I have a family member who constantly says, why couldn't they just put them out and left the rest of us alone? I agree, that would have been great, but we're all going to do the same thing. We're all going to make mistakes, either on purpose or inadvertently. So on the day of judgment, which, as I said, there's a lot of misconception about that. When you die, you have been judged. There's nothing after that. I don't care what religious group it is, they cannot pray you out of a non-existent place where you're going to be punished for a number of years, and you pay the priest so much money and he prays for so many days, and you get to leave, that place and go to heaven. That's not the way it works. God says it's appointed once to man to die, and then the judgment. Now, the judgment day is going to be where, just like our court system, you have a trial. That trial is life. God's watching it. And if you don't live up to his standards, when you die, he's going to immediately send you where you will be for all eternity. So if I wake up and smell smoke, I'm worried because I know where I am. And I don't care if I go in, as one guy said, slide in and smell like smoke on my coat. As long as I get in there, just give me a mop and a bucket and I'll mop those golden streets, which, by the way, I don't expect to see streets of gold. It's impossible for an infinite being to describe an infinite place to a finite mind where they can adequately understand it. So he's used, I guess you'd say, language that we can understand. Gold is valuable. It's beautiful. I don't expect to see 12 gates of, or foundations of pearl. I don't expect to actually see pearly gates. I have no idea what it's going to look like. But this I do know, whatever it is far away and above what we have ever been able to imagine. So after the judgment, when we have a trial here in America or anywhere in the world, they have a trial. If you're convicted, then they pass judgment. You're going to jail for X years or whatever. Well, ours is almost a pass-fail thing. You're either going to heaven or you're not. Now, on the day of judgment, it talks about every evil thought and every bad thing that we have ever done is going to be brought up individually, one-on-one. And I've heard people say, but there's not enough time to do that. Time does not matter. God is not, he's not constrained by time. That was something simply invented for man to be able to mark days and weeks and months and years. God doesn't need time. He's always been, he always will be. So I don't know how that's going to play out. It'll be interesting. I kind of envision us sitting or standing or whatever in a field, and there's this giant TV screen. And your life is up there for everyone to see. Now, what I want is an attorney for me to plead my case. And that's Jesus. And on the screen it's going to say, well, on this date, he did this. And my attorney's going to say, I paid for that. You can't charge him with that. That's been paid. Forget it. Is it going to be that way? I don't know. That's just my two-bit weak brain believing that that's a possibility. Makes sense to me. Why else show it if it's not delineating your charges against you? So, what he wants from us in this life is a little different from what he wants in the life to come, I think. He wants us to love every human being with agape love and to trust in him to keep his promises. Now, I trust God, I trust Jesus, I trust the Spirit implicitly. There is no room in my mind or in my life for doubt. And I'm farther along than a lot of you are in my life, so if I'm going to make a change, I better do it quickly. This could be my last night. I thank God every morning when I wake up, because I know there is a distinct possibility that I may not wake up. Not that God's going to strike me dead, but nobody gets out of this world alive except those that he raises up to meet him in the air when he does come back. Another fallacy of the rapture. He has to come down and sit on a literal throne, on a literal piece of earth. But the Bible says he will come with his glory and his angels, and we will meet him in the air. There's no scripture that says he will ever set foot on this earth again. As a matter of fact, it says it's going to be burned, completely consumed by fire. And if you notice right now, we have all these people that are talking about, we're in the end times. Got a news flash for you. We've been in the end times ever since Jesus was raised from the dead. There is nothing else. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my house are many mansions or rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go now to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will return for you so that you can be where I am. And Thomas said, Lord, we don't even know where you're going. How do we know to get there? And he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one enters the Father except through me. So, there's a lot to be said for a lot of religion. A lot of religious practices are probably in and of themselves, they may be good. Spending money, church's money on missions, that's a good thing. I'm one of those people that happens to believe, and I've been to Nicaragua and Quito, Ecuador, and places down there, Cayambe, and I've been through San Salvador, and I've been through all of Central and South America. I probably have been on 25 or 30 mission trips. But I happen to be a person that does not believe you have to go out of the country to do mission work when we have people right across the street over here that need Jesus every bit as badly. Why don't we do it here? I'm to the point where I can't do much anymore, and that's okay. I've had a good life, but I'm at the end of my wick. It's going to burn out before too much longer. It's just a fact of life. But we could do a lot more good with it across the street than we can to send, how do I say this without offending anybody? We send people that don't even know what they're talking about to a foreign country and spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to get them there and feed and house them there, and they don't really know much about the Bible. They can't talk to their neighbor or their friend because they don't feel comfortable. Well, I'll tell you something. If you have somebody that you know that has any interest at all in learning about the Bible and learning about God and Jesus and what it takes to become a Christian, call me. I'll go with you. I've studied with atheists, I even baptized one time. Very slim success rate. I've studied with Buddhists. I felt sorry for that kid. It's like he showed up to an intellectual battle unarmed. He had nothing. He couldn't tell me what he believed. He just knew that he was a Buddhist, and that was it. I've studied with Catholics. That, to me, is probably the hardest nut to crack that there is, because from birth, they have had it drilled in their heads that you've got to be a Catholic, and you've got to do it this way. And do you know that through the use of transubstantiation, when they're doing the Lord's Supper, the priest blesses the bread, turns around, holds it up to the cross, and it becomes literally, it's transformed into God's or Jesus' body. Then he does the same thing with the fruit of the vine. He prays over it. He blesses it. He turns around, holds it up to that cross, prays another small prayer, and as he does, it becomes literal blood. Jesus, literal blood. Now, I don't know. I have trouble with stuff like that. But I do know this. 2 minutes. I can't hear you. What? I'm deaf. I'm sorry, folks. Cut it off? Oh, second bell? Why don't you tell me at the first one? I can't even get, I tell you what, we'll continue this after the kids cut. You don't mind if no, I won't do that. But I'm going to tell you, we need to do some really strict teaching. Hell is real. If you don't do what God says, you're going there. We have people today that believe that you can take a few hormones, and if you're a man, you can become a woman. And if you want to, and you're a woman, you can become a man. Your DNA is going to say you're whatever you were born. You know, it doesn't change. Well, since my time is up and my family has told me to sit down and shut up, I'll quit now. So good night.